The Skeptic Zone is brought to you by Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz. Visit drbobsquiz.wordpress.com and see if you can match wits with Dr. Bob.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 320 for the 7th of December 2014. Richard Saunders here with you in Sydney, Australia. Well, it's Sunday, it must be Sydney, because Monday I was in Adelaide, and Tuesday I was in Perth, Thursday I was in Brisbane, Friday Melbourne, and then yesterday back here to Sydney. All on the Evening with James Randi tour. And what a wonderful event tour it's been so far, my friends. I hardly know where to start. Travelling the week with James Randi has been quite something, and it's an experience I'll never forget. Anyway, at the beginning of the show, to kick it off, we have a little interview with James Randi I did in Adelaide, I think it was, where we had a quiet moment to ourselves to chat about magic and other things. I think you'll enjoy that. I certainly did. And there'll be more about some of the behind-the-scenes goings-on of a tour with James Randi and the events and the people we've met along the way. It was quite something. After that, it's Maynard. Maynard's spooky action with the one and only Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki. A talk that Maynard did, an interview, I should say, at the Australian Skeptics National Convention. You should see all the interviews Maynard did at the Australian Skeptics National Convention. In fact, you will hear them over the course of the next weeks. What a catalogue I have, folks. He was a busy man. Thank you, Maynard. Thank you once again. And then to wrap up the show, it's the first part of a convention report with Jo Alabaster. For those of you who weren't there, or even if you were, Jo's wrap-up of the convention, part 1, a bit of an overview. Oh, somewhere in the show today, mixed up somewhere, will be a week in science from the Royal Institution of Australia. And that's where we kicked off the tour with James Randi. At the Royal Institution of Australia, I saw it at last. Had a great time there. Caught up with Paul Willis, the director, Dr. Paul Willis, a good friend of mine, which was fantastic. And my friend, what a wonderful place the Royal Institution of Australia really is. Worth a visit. What a fascinating place, full of history, full of science. And we really enjoyed our visit there. Those people in Canberra in the ACT can come and see me when I give my talk, The Making of the Vaccination Chronicles, and Are Ghosts Scared of Skeptics? That'll be this Wednesday, the 10th of December, at the Ainsley Football Club, 52 Wakefield Avenue, Canberra, ACT. For more information, visit www.canberraskeptics.org.au. I'll see you there. Well, my head's still spinning from flying all around the country with James Randi this week. And as I record this, we have one more show to do tonight in Sydney, which is a sold-out event, I'm told. All the seats have gone. James Randi is, what a trooper. Wow, grueling schedule, lots of cities, lots of flights, lots of hotels. But James Randi was there front and centre, always ready to perform and always ready to meet people. So, well, I run downstairs. Oh, people, thank you. Yes. Thank you to all the Skeptic Zone fans who said hello to me all around the country on this trip. Yes, Fred the cat is doing fine for those people who asked. He was just here a minute ago. I don't know where he is now. And yes, I really do run downstairs and get something to eat out of the fridge. The stairs are right here. And it was a real pleasure to meet so many fans. And thank you for coming up and saying hello and letting me know how much you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Well, yes, now it's time for me to run downstairs, open up the fridge, and finish off the last of the chocolate champagne bottle that SGU gave me for my birthday. Thanks, guys. While I'm doing that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
What are we doing here, Richard?
We're Randy. I wish I knew. We've found ourselves now in the city of Adelaide. This is the first city on the big tour, the Evening with James Randi tour. It's a wonderful city, and last night I think the tour got off to a good start.
Oh yes, no, I think we did okay. We amateurs.
Yes.
You're not accustomed to public speaking.
Not at all, no.
And I have never done it, of course.
You not too? Oh, no.
No, I've never done it in my life. I'm frightened of it.
I think we winged it pretty well then.
Oh, yeah.
We did. And it was a very enjoyable evening. Of course, the audience saw the documentary, The Honest Liar, followed by a brief break, and then you and I chatting on stage for an hour, which was most enjoyable.
Yeah, are you sure? Because some people, I think they died in the audience, and that's why they weren't moving much when the other people moved out. But no, I think we did very well, seriously, Richard. We did very well, and it may be a beautiful friendship from now on.
That's right. Well, I first met you in the year 2000. You were out here for a big skeptical convention in Sydney. Yes. But your reputation preceded you, of course. But I remember that quite fondly because you were very proudly showing me your latest digital camera. And I was very proudly showing you my latest movie digital camera, which was big at the time.
Yes, you were always trying to up me one.
I am. You know. I still am, I think.
Yeah, yes, I see. But not too successfully.
No, never. But one of my fondest memories of that time was that it was the first time I saw the card trick known as Out of This World.
Oh, yes.
And you performed that on the boat cruise we had. And I honestly thought that could not happen, what I just saw before my eyes. And I subsequently learned the trick, but the first time you see that particular trick, you cannot fathom how that's possible.
Oh, yeah. No, Out of This World was... what was his name? And that I can't think of the man's name. I never met him, but it was something in the 1930s or so. He invented it, and he's in the magic profession, the conjuring profession, pardon me. He's widely known for that. And there are about 3 or 4 different versions of it.
Yes.
But the one that we both do, I think, is the better one.
Oh, it's one of those tricks which... It's one of those tricks which has the particular punch in it where the participant is the person who is doing the trick.
Yes,
Isn't
entirely.
Yeah,
This is entirely in your control. You dealt it exactly the way you wanted to.
Yes.
I didn't interfere.
Yeah.
No. And when they turn the cards over, it just floors them.
Well, it floors them. And the first time I saw it, and I'm sure it's the case, is the first time the audience see it, I was floored. I was absolutely gobsmacked.
And you're not easily floored.
Not easily.
No, not easily. No.
Not easily. In that occasion I was. And it gets back to what we chatted about last night on stage, is your love of conjuring and the adventures you've had with that. Setting aside your skeptical and critical thinking outreach, if we get back to the fact that you were for many years the performing conjurer and escape artist.
Oh, yes. I made a living at it. I barely eked a living at it.
Yeah.
I actually did rather well, traveled all over the world, and the profession was very good to me, and my audiences were very good to me. And what I'm currently involved in, the whole skeptical picture, of course, a professional skeptical picture, I must say, is my way of paying back my audiences for the applause that they gave me and the support that they gave me and the income that they gave me over the years. It's very true.
Yeah,
oh, yes. They supported me, and this is, I feel, a way of giving it back.
Absolutely. And it's one of the great pleasures, I'm sure, that you discover when you travel around the world is other magicians will come and say hello.
Oh, yes.
Again, setting aside other skeptics who are always coming to you, but just getting back to your pure love of the conjuring art. Last night we had a young magician come up. Yes, indeed. And he bought one of the James Randi decks.
Oh, yes.
And was shuffling them with one hand, much to my amazement.
Oh, yeah. No, he appears to be very clever with his hands, and I wished I'd had more time to spend with him, because I had a couple of things, little twists that I wanted to explain to him, but he had to hustle away, and we did as well. So
Yeah. So when you were a young magician starting out, what was the basis of your gaining your knowledge? Was it mostly books? Was it other magicians? Do you have mentors?
Well, I got to meet Harry Blackstone. Harry Blackstone, Sr. I'm speaking of now, was the reigning magician of the day. And through a fortuitous circumstance, I got to meet him, and he rather inspired me because he was a lovely, fatherly sort of figure, and he sort of took me under his wing, only for, about 2 hours on an afternoon.
Yeah.
And that made all the difference in my life.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an archaeologist, and I wanted to be a chemist and a few things like that. Archaeology had really attracted me. It still does. But after meeting Harry Blackstone and being so charmed by him, I figured, well, maybe I could do something in this line too. And apparently I was well enough suited for it.
Apparently so. And what was it? You tell the story of seeing the magical act for the first time and just being astonished.
Yes.
Yeah. And you felt that that's something that you wanted to impart to other people, this astonishment.
Yeah, I was quite overcome. He stood back from this lady on a couch, and I was in the first balcony.
Oh, yeah.
So I had a beautiful view of it. It cost me 12 cents. It was a matinee. Yes, I mean, expensive outlays here.
Canadian cents.
Canadian cents, yeah. And, oh my goodness, I just leaned on that balcony railing there, and he said, he had a speech impediment somewhat.
Oh, yes.
I'll try to do it. He said, Princess Azra, rise from the bed on which you were just placed a moment ago. Rise. And she rose in the air.
Wow.
Now, if that doesn't spook you out,
yes.
And the audience was totally silent from wall to wall.
Yeah.
As they always were with Harry Blackstone. He cast a spell, so to speak. And then he said, descend once more to the bed from which you rose a moment ago. It was so wonderful. It was magical. That's the only way I can describe it. And when I later learned the secret of that particular levitation, for example, I realized what it had taken to do it. He just walked around and waved his hands about and intoned these mysterious words. But they were so well choreographed, the moves and the words and such, that your admiration had to go out to the man like that. How did he ever develop that? Obviously, it was his act and his delivery of it and the charm that he exuded from the stage. He's a wonderful, wonderful magician. And
is this, and I can tell by the passion which you're speaking about this, I guess it's partly the reason why you are so irked, if I can use that expression,
oh, yes.
when people use this wonderful talent of conjuring and the wonderful mind games for the wrong purposes.
To swindle people. To misinform and to cripple them.
Yes.
Because the evangelists do that. They cripple people emotionally and financially in so many ways. They just reduce them to dust, and they sweep that dust away or let the wind take it away.
They don't care.
No.
They don't care. They have found a wonderful, from their point of view, way to take advantage of people, which encroaches upon a noble art.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, it's not so much the shame that it might bring to the conjuring trade at all, in my estimation, because people who view it don't look upon it as conjuring. They don't think that it's a conjuring trick. Yes. They just don't know. And, of course, they don't know. They don't have the expertise to know. But to cruelly treat people like that, to drain them of their finances and of their emotional security, that's not right, Richard. It's just not right to do that sort of thing, particularly to elderly people or people who are malfunctioning in some way. They may be ill.
Easy targets.
Oh, yes, easy targets.
Yeah.
Vulnerable and so vulnerable that you want to go and shake them. Say, wake up, wake up. What you've just seen is a fraud.
Yes.
But you can't reach each individual person. You've just got to write the books, and you've got to make the speeches, the lectures, whatnot, and the TV appearances to convince people, or just get them thinking. Get them thinking. And to start that thinking process, that discrimination, that critical thinking process in people, that's what you should be doing.
I think so. Yes, I think so. And that's what you do. That's
absolutely.
One of the reasons you're here in Australia.
That's right.
And to meet friends and fans and have a good time, of course, and we're having a delightful time so far. But to get this message out, which you have done for many, many years now.
Many moons. To say the least.
To say the least. Well, Randy, we've only just started. We have Perth in just a few days, and then we have Brisbane, and we have Melbourne, and we have Sydney, and then I think you're going home.
Yeah, I believe so, eventually.
Yes. At some stage or other.
Eventually, yes. And, when I think of it, I was just in this very hotel bed here last night sleeping, and as I drifted off to sleep, I thought, directly below me is my home.
Yeah.
It's the width of the whole planet away. It's as far away as I can possibly get from home.
Yeah.
And yet I can pick up my cell phone and press a button on it, and I will hear a voice at the other end that's coming to me from the farthest possible point, unless you happen to be an astronaut in space someplace. That's remarkable. That's a magic trick.
That's a magic trick.
That's a miracle.
Yeah.
There's no question of it.
And you can also see them.
Yes.
You can see them.
Yes. Well, I don't necessarily want to do that with everybody, but it is wonderful. I can speak to the other side of the earth from as far away as I could possibly reach physically. And it cost me so little.
Yes.
It's just a small investment of time and of money. Very small investment.
It's quite something. And at 86, you have seen dramatic changes.
Oh yeah, no. I've often said that I'm very fortunate to have been born when I was born, because I saw these grand changes in technology and in human understanding of the world. But at the same time, I think that if I'd been born 200 years ago, I would have said exactly the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's right. There have been a lot of changes over the last few centuries.
Yeah. But 86 years is a long time to observe the world. I'll tell you that.
It is. Well, look, I look forward to chatting to you in 10 years when you're 96, and you can tell me about all the other changes that you've just observed.
When they ask me my age, I say 86 going on 100 because I'm optimistic. Maybe foolishly optimistic, but I hope not.
I think we should be
got a lot
optimistic
of work
too.
to do.
I think you do. Randy, thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Are you sitting down listening to this? What do you think you're doing? Stand up quickly. What if we said that the amount that you sat down was a major health concern? There's a growing amount of research which is showing that the amount that you sit down can increase your risk of various medical problems, such as diabetes and cardiovascular disease. One study delved into the possible reason for this and found that the amount that people sat down altered the length of their telomeres, which are DNA caps on the end of your chromosomes. These telomeres shorten as you age, and sitting for more time leads to that shortening happening even faster, increasing your risk of age-related conditions. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you're sitting down and not exercising, you're possibly unfit and leading a poor lifestyle. But it's not quite that straightforward. In these studies, the amount of exercise didn't have any effect. It was purely the amount of sitting down time, and exercising didn't negate the effects of sitting. The effect is still seen in people who are otherwise fit, including runners. One suggestion is that while you're standing, your hamstrings and thigh muscles are working more than when you are sitting, and this small amount of constant work is what makes the difference. So if you want to stay healthy, try to reduce the amount of time you're sitting down, or stand up as often as you can. And now, 4 fast facts about stand-up work desks. Stand-up work desks were reportedly favoured by Leonardo da Vinci, Ernest Hemingway and Winston Churchill. Some of the earliest evidence of the health effects of sitting was in 1953, when a study showed bus conductors had a lower risk of heart attack than their sitting driver counterparts. Denmark has become the first country in the world to make it compulsory to offer employees the choice of a sitting or standing desk. And just remember, Standing or frequent gentle exercise is not meant to replace vigorous exercise, but complement it in a healthy lifestyle. That's it for this Week in Science. For more information on the health effects of sitting, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Ben Lewis, and we'll catch you next week.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
I'm here in a very small room with an air conditioning noise in the background with Dr. Karl. Hi, Dr. Karl. How are you? I'm waggling my fez at you.
Dr. Maynard, I'm recognising your fez, and I'll just sit here and be amazed, and thank you for inviting me here.
Oh, and thank you for a great talk you gave us all then about your journey through America and your car that broke down. So what made you think, as a scientist and a rational thinker, that you should go for such a long journey in such an old car?
We've had engines that work for a long time, and I would have thought that the guy who rented me the car for a very great price would have done the right maintenance and preparation. Unfortunately, he didn't. But sure, you can get a car engine to go tremendously long distances. In fact, with the modern technology, the fuel economy of that car was 20 miles per gallon because we were doing gentle highway driving, which was remarkably good for such a big engine and a big loud noise.
Now, you haven't steered towards the electric car in your own life, have you?
Yes, I've gone one hybrid car, and I bought another hybrid car. And in fact, the guy who helped set up Apple, Steve Wozniak, whenever he comes to a new country on his travels around the world, he gets hold of a Prius and then deliberately tries to break the speed limit as high as he can, and then gets busted by the cops. And so it comes out in the newspaper, Steve Wozniak busted for doing 180 kilometres per hour in a Prius.
Wow.
And so that way he points out that the cars can go really well. They're now moving towards totally electric cars, and we're going with both larger capacity and also better battery technology, as well as in some companies will give you a loaner if you want to do a 4,000 kilometre trip in one go.
Now, why has it taken so long, you think? Do you think there's a conspiracy going on here? Because I bought a Beetle back in 2000, and I thought, okay, this will probably be my last petrol car. And if I was buying another car, I might have to get a small petrol engine turbo rather than a hybrid or an electric, because to me they're just not quite right yet.
If you buy a Tesla, which is moderately expensive, you can do 500 kilometres on the electric charge. It's about 80 or so kilowatt hours. Just to put those numbers in perspective, the average house draws about 25 kilowatt hours a day. We used to draw 28. We're down to 8, and our solar cells make 33 in summer and 16 at the lowest in winter. And so the cars have got about 20 kilowatt hour batteries, but the Tesla has got an 85, I think, and it can do 500 kilometres, and then you can do a 20-minute quick charge on the highway, which will take you 300 kilometres.
But you're looking at a very expensive car there.
It is, but the maintenance costs are less. There are other ways around it. We're in a transition stage where we're moving towards the electric car as a viable beast via different pathways. One is getting the better battery technology, which we've been very slow on, and the other one is getting more recharging stations. If you go back to the very, very first journey taken in a car, Bertha Benz, married to Gottlieb Benz, saying, "Thank you, Gottlieb, you've been doing a nice job inventing this thing you call a car. I'm now going to use it and go on a trip and see my mother." There were no proper roads at the time, so she had to go on horse carriage tracks, and luckily the wheel spacing of the car tyres was roughly the same as the carriage spacing. There were deep roughs. The brakes died along the way. She had to cut up her leather handbag and make some more handbrakes. And here's the important part. Before she went on the trip, she had to order a whole bunch of drums of benzene from the pharmacist. There was not a single refueling station in the known universe for the internal combustion car. And then over the last century, they've increased in numbers, and now we've got them all over the place. And somehow we think that's the only way to go. So it's not that hard after only a century to change over to electric refueling with a very fast charge.
But in the early days of the 20th century, there was some advances in the electric car, wasn't there, in the early on?
Yes, but what killed them was the fuel tank and the capacity. Consider a 44-gallon drum of petrol. You can buy a regular barrel of oil, that's 215 litres. A barrel of oil is 160 litres. You can buy a barrel of oil, which is just only a little bit bigger than a 44-gallon drum, for about $100. It has the energy of two men working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day for an entire year, for 52 weeks a year. You get two men's labour for a year for $100. And so fossil fuels have enormous embedded energy. And so you had much better capacity for covering big distances with a fuel car, petrol, gasoline, whatever you call it, as opposed to a battery. But now, with advances in battery technology, we're going down that pathway. In fact, the Chinese are heading down that pathway. They're making it one of their 4 moonshots.
Oh, okay. What do you think of the Chinese space program and the Indian program? They're very economical, aren't they?
Yeah, the Indians got to Mars for about $80 million, which is cheaper than movies spent about that. I'm using here the word moonshot in a metaphorical sense, where a country such as the USA spends, in today's dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars and a decade of time, so the country goes down a specific pathway that leads to an outcome, in the case of the Americans, within 10 years, getting to the moon and back, but also generating $137 worth of spin-off for every dollar they put in, accidentally inventing integrated circuits and therefore the modern computer, and therefore accidentally having a well-educated technical middle class and trades class, and therefore leading to America being a world leader in technology. And they stayed that way for a third of a century before falling over recently. So China has 4 of these metaphorical moonshots. One metaphorical moonshot is to do with transport. So that covers everything from buses to going to the moon. And they've already landed a rover on the moon, which is an immense technological achievement, and they intend to get humans on the moon and back again by 2025, whereas the Americans can't get anything into space at the moment, no humans. The Americans cannot launch humans into space.
What seems to be their problem?
It's complicated, but I'll talk about that later. So let me just stay on the line of the moonshot, okay? But there are different problems. So if the Americans want to get into orbit, they have to pay the Russians taxi fare of about $70 million a head. So as part of their first moonshot, the Chinese moonshot on transport, that also includes trains. And so what they've done is have high-speed trains running across the country, and they have a high-speed train running 2,400 kilometres, and that train does 2,300 kilometres in 8 hours, just under 300 kilometres an hour. And in China today, more people every day catch a high-speed train than in America do people catch an aeroplane. Think how more efficient it is for the country, for the moving of people around, to use these high-speed trains. So one of their moonshots is transport. The second moonshot is genetic engineering. And to prove what they can do and get their skills good, what they've done is genetically modify cows to deliver human breast milk. Human breast milk sells for about $27 a litre. There are uses for it. And they've also genetically engineered or genetically mapped as many strains of rice as they can, because rice is a big part of their diet. Now, have you heard of the grassy stunt rice virus?
No, it sounds pretty evil. It sounds like something that someone stroking a cat that lives in a hollowed-out volcano would do.
So they had it hit the world in the late 60s. And it basically destroyed all the rice. It infected the rice and killed it. And so the botanists of the day went looking through their entire repertoire, library, repository of different strains of rice. And out of the 6,200 and something strains of rice, only one, was resistant to the grassy stunt virus. And they then bred that into all the other types of rice, and as a result, we still have rice today. Because the variety that they found was a very mediocre, or had a very mediocre yield. So, getting back to this concept, the Chinese are going big into genetics as their second moonshot, spending hundreds of millions of dollars and spending a decade. Their third moonshot is with regard to energy and becoming green. And you might remember that recently the Chinese and the Americans signed an accord. This has been misrepresented in the papers with regard to global warming, as the Chinese can do all the polluting they like with carbon dioxide until 2030 and then they'll think about it. In fact, in the year that's just gone past, the year 2013, the Chinese installed a huge amount of electrical generating capacity for their burgeoning population, bringing them up into the middle class. In the year 2013, the majority of it was renewables. And they have stated that every year they will increase the proportion of it that is renewables until it's entirely renewables. This has been misreported in the Murdoch press as the Chinese are putting down a new coal-fired power station every 10 days and not going to change anything until 2030 on this non-binding treaty. So the Chinese intend, and they will do it, to become the greenest nation on earth and then sell that technology to the rest of the world. The fourth moonshot takes us back to your very first question. Their fourth moonshot is the electric car. Not married into green, not married into transport, but as a standalone event, because of that nice coincidence that the amount of energy that you need to run a car for a day, 100 kilometres, 20 kilowatt hours, is roughly equal to the amount of energy needed by a house. And they intend to have across China in 10 years not millions of electric cars, hundreds of millions.
Wow.
They'll all be electric cars, and they'll plug into the grid. A car only operates for an hour or two a day on average, and the rest of the time it's just sitting there, and so that'll be part of their mobile battery system, which is an essential part of their overall guide for the country, because they think on a 10 or 20-year span, not just to the next poll or even the next election. They think long-term.
As a science communicator in 2014, how do you feel with the situation with science in Australia and the attitude of the government to it this time round?
Philosophical. All I hope is that the pendulum will swing. And at the moment we're in a situation where our funding for science, R&D, which has been proven over and over again to generate huge amounts of innovation, is at its lowest in 30 years. So it's not just the current government. It's all of them. ALP just means another Liberal Party. And education and science are not seen as investments in the country, but rather as an intolerable burden.
Look, and one thing in your House of Karl's book that people are going to read, and it's going to make them want to put their brain out and wash it and put it back in. What's the thing that will really blow their mind?
There's a cure for cancer, which works.
What, carrots, is it?
No. Bummer. Which doesn't work all the time, but when it does work, it works 100%. It's called the abscopal effect. And so suppose you've got some poor bugger who's got cancer of the everything, and it's spread into their brain and their lungs and their liver and their spleen and their muscles and their bones, and they go to the doctor and they're on their pathway to death. They're not going to get better. Everything's been tried. They're just getting worse. They're in a wheelchair. They can't get up. They've lost their strength. They've got this terrible pain in their hip. And the doctor says, yeah, you almost certainly the cancer has spread to your hip. We've got this CAT scan which shows that there's cancer there. It's expanding. It's causing pressure effects. Let me zap the cancer with a high dose of radiation which will kill the cancer, and you can't give that dose to the whole body because it'll kill a person, and we'll try and get you through, knowing that they're going to die, but at least they won't be in pain from their hip. They come back a couple of weeks later and they're saying, you know what, I feel better, and the pain's gone, but I feel better. And then the doctor says, well, that's great, look, here's an appointment to come and see me in 3 months. If you don't feel well enough, ring, thinking they're not going to be alive in 3 months. They come back in 3 months, they're walking, they've put on 5 kilograms of muscle. The doctor does a CAT scan, MRI scan, and everywhere where there before was visible cancer in their body has gone. Welcome to the abscopal effect, story number 2 in my book. And basically what happens is that you make the cancer visible to the immune system. You get a cold or a flu, you're not worried. You know that your immune system will fix it up because it'll recognise it. Suddenly, something, and we don't know what, has made the cancer visible to the immune system. The immune system says, what the heck is this? And attacks it. And as the cancer mutates and tries to evade, the immune system mutates to change it and kills it. Abscopal effect, read about it.
And what's your last word to you, Dr. Karl? What's the first thing people should do to get their critical thinking going?
Exercise. Exercise is good. Talk. Read. And always demand the facts. Ignore opinions, stick to the facts.
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. So, last weekend I attended the Australian Skeptical event of the year, the Australian Skeptics National Convention, which this year was held in Chatswood, a suburb of Sydney. Now, before I regale you with a report on the convention, I'd like to give a huge thank you to the Skeptic Zone's very generous sponsor, Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz, who made my convention attendance possible. Dr. Bob was not at the convention himself, but I do hope to one day meet you and say thanks in person. On Friday night, I attended the welcome event, though I spent the evening mingling with the attendees downstairs while the SGU live show was on. Already the con was fantastic. I really enjoyed meeting old friends, people I've spoken with online but hadn't met in person, some of the Skeptic Zone's lovely listeners, and fellow skeptics from not just across Australia but overseas as well. Now, the crowd was pleasingly diverse and friendly, and remained so over the weekend. Friday night drinks before a convention can be dangerous. I limited myself to a couple of sips of champagne to toast Richard Saunders' birthday, and happy birthday again, Richard, then headed back to my digs to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for Saturday morning. A registration was first up, and might I say the goodie bag we received upon arrival contained one of the funnest novelty items I have ever received: Australian Skeptics Word Salad Magnetic Poetry. If anyone isn't familiar with magnetic poetry, they're sets of small magnets with words, usually maintaining a theme, which can be combined on one's fridge in various ways to create phrases and bizarre poetry. This set contains fantastic words, many commonly utilised by woo merchants, which can be combined to create absurd phrases. Advanced quantum truth is a cosmic bunyip. Death is a potential memory. Advanced astrology to predict ancient alien. It's fun. The theatre in which the talks were being held was rather amazing. 2 sections of seating on the ground level and tiered seating around the room. Eran Segev, current president of Australian Skeptics Inc., opened the convention at 9 a.m. and we were off. We were lucky enough to have the esteemed George Harab MC the event, bringing humour in between talks. The keynote speech was up first, given by Dick Smith, entrepreneur, businessman, political activist, and one of the founders of Australian Skeptics. Dick's topic was, "Is the human power to self-delude unlimited?" He covered several issues, told us a few amazing anecdotes about people's ability to be fooled, involving missing planes, icebergs, and Tasmanian tigers, and then settled in on discussing an issue that he cares about passionately, our society's expectation that we can continue to aim for perpetual growth in a finite world. If you get an opportunity to hear Dick speak on this topic, you'll be presented with a lot of food for thought regarding the sustainability of our way of living. It was quite an honour to have him open the convention. Next up was Dr. Karl. If you've heard Dr. Karl speak before, and I think you might actually have heard him earlier in this episode talking with Maynard, you'll be familiar with his style. He gave a high-paced presentation speaking on a trip to the Antarctic, the view from the ISS, cute ways to calculate appropriate tips for service staff using pi, Texan cowgirls for Jesus for open carry, barbed wire, his recent journey across Route 66 and trip to Tam, US Senators' cob sheets, an app for home delivery of medicinal marijuana in Vegas, Sarah Palin, fruit fly research, and popularly held beliefs which aren't scientifically supported. And somehow he managed to link it all back to a common theme. He's like the Eddie Izzard of science communication. It's always a pleasure to see him, and I find his enthusiasm for information and communication contagious. The next talk was given by astronomer Amanda Bauer, who is AstroPixie on Twitter. She spoke on the eventual collision of Andromeda and the Milky Way, and she showed some recently created video of how this is likely to play out, and the visualization was sensational. Then the first live Skeptics Guide to the Universe recording of the convention. Now, if you're an SGU listener, you should really enjoy this one. The guest rogue was none other than our very own Richard Saunders. After lunch, Joanne Benamu presented the Australian Skeptics Annual Awards. We gave a rundown of the nominees for the 2014 Bent Spoon Award a few weeks ago here on The Zone, and I've been waiting with anticipation for the announcement. The Bent Spoon Award is presented annually to the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudo-scientific piffle. There were many worthy contenders, but the clear winner this year was Dr. Larry Marshall, newly appointed head of the CSIRO, for his statements regarding his perception that water divining can be around 80% effective and that the CSIRO could pursue research into divining to aid the nation's agriculture sector. More heartening was the Skeptic of the Year award, which went to blogger Reasonable Hank for his tireless efforts exposing and publicising non-evidence-based chiropractic practices in Australia. It was an absolute delight to see him recognised for his hard work. Unfortunately, he was unable to attend the convention to accept the award, but Ken McLeod from Stop the AVN accepted it on his behalf and read a lovely speech from Hank. Finally, the Thornett Award for the Promotion of Reason, named for the Tasmanian skeptic Fred Thornett. And it was so wonderful to see it awarded to the amazing people from the Northern Rivers vaccination supporters. The next event of the convention was a consumer protection panel, featuring Julian Morrow, Kirsten Drysdale and Chaz Liccardello of ABC's Checkout and The Chaser, Alan Kirkland, CEO of Choice, and Delia Rickard, Deputy Chair of the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, that's the ACCC. The panel was moderated by Michael Marshall of Merseyside Skeptics, QEDcon and host of the Be Reasonable podcast from the UK. Marsh did a fantastic job running the panel, and we had a bit of a moment during the open question session at the end, when a chap introduced himself as a chiropractor and wanted to know why Choice targeted his profession and didn't endorse chiropractic as an evidence-based modality. I think that Alan Kirkland addressed the questioner as best he could, with so little background information regarding where he was coming from and what sort of chiropractic he practiced. But then Marsh engaged with the questioner and asked him whether he subscribed to the subluxation theory and the like. It was a really interesting moment. Little was made clear by the chiropractor, but Marsh gave us an excellent example on how to politely question somebody in a somewhat tense situation in which claims are being made which are not supported by evidence. A skill which is very useful for those of us who wish to publicly engage as skeptics. After a break, there was a talk by our own Dr. Rachel Dunlop on open access publishing, which several young academics approaching a stage in their careers where they were ready to begin submitting their work for publication told me that they found incredibly useful. Next, Kendrick Frazier, editor of Skeptical Inquirer, author, Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and CSI Council member and Fellow. And he gave us an outline on the history of organised skepticism in the US and the news on where things are at today. And finally, the last talk of the day was from George Harab, changing the tone a little with a talk titled Unbelief and Grief, Thinking Critically About Loss and Mourning. Now, as he pointed out, in skeptical circles we do tend to focus on the rational. And where does that leave us as a subculture when dealing with the emotional side of life? It was a heck of a talk, a little difficult, but he did incredibly well with it, and I credit his courage in tackling such a personal issue. Well, I'm going to leave it there for the moment. This report will continue next week, and I'll talk about the dinner event, Sunday's talks, and my impressions of the convention overall.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. In the coming week, so much more from Maynard at the National Convention, chatting to all sorts of people. It goes on and on and on. What a catalogue, a back catalogue coming your way. And some more from Jo Alabaster about her thoughts on the convention. And some more from me about my adventures over the past week with James Randi. What it's like to tour with the amazing Randi. Well, it was amazing. Until then, this is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.